Existence is a strange thing, isn't it? When you stop and really look at it, it feels like everything we experience is both here and not here at the same time. The world seems so solid, so tangible, yet when you dig into it, it begins to blur, to soften at the edges, and you realize it's all a kind of illusion. We tend to think of ourselves as separate, as individuals, as if we are like the objects around us, solid and separate from everything else. But that's the trick, the game we've been taught to play. You are not just you. You are the entire universe trying to experience itself through the lens of this body, of this mind. It's all one thing, this vast and unbroken flow of life. The tree isn't separate from the earth, the sky isn't distant from the rain. Everything is part of this cosmic dance, this unfolding, this endless movement. And we are in it. But we don't realize it because we think we are apart from it. You, me, the air, the stars, the oceans, all of it is in this constant state of becoming, shifting, blending, fading, and returning. We go through life as though we have a clear sense of who we are, but when you pause and really question that, you begin to see the absurdity. That you think of as yourself as just a collection of thoughts, memories, and perceptions. It's a concept, a label. But when you peel back the layers, when you really look, you find that what you call I is nothing more than a flow of energy, a ripple in the vast sea of existence. It's a flicker, a flash, a moment that will soon vanish. And yet, while it's here, it believes itself to be something solid, something permanent. Take the breath, for example. You think you are breathing, but is it really you? You are not the one who decides to breathe, it just happens. The body does it, without any effort, without any sense of identity. It's a rhythm, a pulse that's been happening for billions of years, long before you ever came into being. In this very moment, there are countless processes happening inside you that you have no control over, and yet you feel as though you are the master of it all. And then there's time. What a curious thing. We move through it as though it is something linear, as though it moves from past to present to future. But in truth, all of time exists simultaneously. The past, the present, the future, they are all happening right now, all in the same moment. We just experience it in a linear fashion because that's how we are conditioned to see it. But step outside that for just a moment, and you realize there is no now separate from the past or the future. There is only this ongoing, endless flow, and you in your little slice of awareness are just a tiny point in that vast, eternal river. When you look at it like this, existence becomes truly weird. It's not that it's strange in an absurd way, but strange in the sense that it can't really be explained. We search for meaning, for purpose, for answers, but the more we search, the more elusive it becomes. And maybe that's the point. Maybe there's no need for a final answer, no need for a clear explanation. Maybe the joy, the beauty, the mystery of existence lies in the fact that we can't grasp it, that it slips through our fingers like water, always just out of reach. Life is a paradox. It's both meaningless and meaningful. It's both fleeting and eternal. We are born, we live, and we die, and yet, in some strange way, none of it ever truly ends. It's all connected, all part of this great unfolding. We think we understand, but really we are just along for the ride, experiencing this wild, wonderful, and utterly mysterious thing called existence. The weirdness of it all is that we can never fully understand it, and yet we are it. You are the universe experiencing itself, and that is the most peculiar, beautiful thing of all. Existence is a strange thing. If we really sit down and think about it, everything we encounter seems at once completely familiar and utterly foreign. We live in a world that feels real, that feels concrete. Yet when we look closer, we realize that what we call reality is an intricate, delicate play of perception. Our senses take in bits and pieces of information and weave them together into what we experience as the world. But what is the world really? What are we perceiving when we think we know what's happening around us? How much of it is actually out there, and how much of it is merely a projection of our minds? Take the act of seeing, for instance. You open your eyes and you see the world around you. But what exactly is happening in that moment? Light enters the eye, it hits the retina, and signals are sent to the brain, where an image is constructed. The process is so swift, so seamless, that you never even think about it. And yet the world you experience through your eyes is not directly out there, as it appears to be. What you see is the brain's interpretation of signals it receives. The light waves are not a tree, they are simply patterns, frequencies vibrating in space. The tree, the color green, the shape of its leaves, all of this is your brain's construction. The reality you perceive is your mind's model, an image that it builds out of raw sensory data. This tree that you see is not really a tree at all. It is a dance of light and shadow, a series of electrical impulses that your mind shapes into something coherent. And yet we never think of it that way. We assume that the world we see, the world we touch, the world we experience is the world as it is. We are convinced that our senses give us access to objective truth. But in truth, our senses only give us a filtered version of reality. We don't see ultraviolet light, but many creatures do. Our ears are tuned to a narrow range of frequencies, but other animals can hear sounds that are completely beyond our grasp. We don't even experience the world in full color, because our vision is limited to a narrow spectrum of the electromagnetic field. The world that we experience is a tiny sliver of what's actually there. Our perception is confined, limited, distorted, and yet we walk around thinking we know exactly what's going on, as if we have it all figured out. This, my friend, is the first great illusion. And then there's time. Time is something we think we know very well. It's something we measure, something we track, something that dictates our lives. We divide it into seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, years. We keep time by looking at the clock, by watching the sun rise and set, by the turning of the seasons. But what is time, really? Is it a force? Is it a dimension? Is it an illusion? Time is such a strange thing because, although we measure it so meticulously, we can never really hold it in our hands. We can never really grasp it. Time passes, but where does it go? The moment you try to capture it, to freeze it, it slips away like sand through your fingers. Time seems to stretch and compress. When you are a child, a year feels like a lifetime. But when you are older, a year passes in the blink of an eye. The same span of time, yet your perception of it shifts. But when we stop to think about it, time is not something that moves from the past to the present to the future. That is just the way we experience it. We are so conditioned to think in terms of linear progression that we don't realize that time, in its deepest sense, may not be linear at all. Perhaps all of time exists simultaneously as a vast and unbroken whole. The past, the present, and the future might not be separate from one another. Perhaps the moments we call the past are not gone at all, but still here, still existing in some deeper, more mysterious sense. And maybe the future is already here, not as a set of events waiting to unfold, but as possibilities, as potentialities that are always there, just waiting for us to become aware of them. If time is not a straight line, if it is not a progression from one moment to the next, then what does that mean for our lives? What does that mean for our sense of self, for the way we understand our place in the world? It means that we are not isolated individual entities moving through a fixed timeline. Instead, we are part of an interconnected whole, part of a vast web of existence that transcends the limitations of our perception. Our lives, our experiences, are not just isolated events happening in a vacuum. They are part of a much larger pattern, a pattern that stretches beyond our understanding, beyond our senses, beyond the limits of time. It's this pattern, this flow, that we are a part of, and we are always part of it, whether we are aware of it or not. When we look at ourselves, we tend to think of ourselves as separate beings, as individuals who are somehow distinct from everything else. We think of the world as made up of many different things, each one existing independently. But what if this is all an illusion? What if the truth is that there is no outside world, no other people, no objects in space? What if everything we experience is one vast, interconnected process? What if, instead of seeing the world as a collection of things, we could see it as a single, seamless flow? A river, a movement, a dance in which everything is intimately connected, and everything is part of the same unfolding. We think of ourselves as individuals, as separate from the world around us, but that is a deeply ingrained idea, a concept we carry with us throughout our lives. We are taught to believe that we are separate from the rest of existence, that we are distinct from nature, from the people around us, and from the very fabric of the universe itself. But when you step back and look at it, you realize that this idea of separateness is nothing but a mental construct. It's a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. It's a way of organizing our experience, of trying to give meaning to the chaos we encounter. But the truth is, we are not separate. We are not individuals, we are part of the whole, part of this endless process. And it is this process that gives rise to everything we think of as me. When you begin to see yourself as part of the whole, as part of the great unfolding of existence, it changes everything. You begin to understand that you are not the center of the universe, and yet, in another sense, you are the universe experiencing itself. There is no you apart from the world, there is no me distinct from the universe. We are the same thing in different forms, and the boundaries between us are, in the end, arbitrary. The very idea of self is itself a product of this same illusion. We have been conditioned to think of ourselves as a fixed, permanent entity, a solid I that exists independently of the world. But when you look deeply into yourself, when you really explore the nature of who you are, you begin to see that there is no solid self at all. There are only patterns, impressions, sensations, thoughts, and experiences. There is no you in the way we think of you. There is only the process, the flow, the unfolding. We are not objects. We are not fixed. We are movement. We are waves on the ocean of existence, rising and falling in response to the currents of life. And what about life itself? What is life, really? We think of life as something that happens to us, as something we experience, something we live, but is life really something we experience? Or is it something we are? When we speak of life, we are speaking of the process, the movement, the unfolding that is happening all around us and within us. Life is not a thing. It is not an object. It is not a separate entity that exists independently of us. Life is the process of becoming. Life is the flow of energy, the constant state of change, the endless dance of creation and destruction. We are not separate from life, we are life itself in its ever-changing, ever-unfolding expression. And in this we find the greatest mystery, the mystery of death. We think of death as the end, as the cessation of life. We imagine it as a final, irreversible event that brings an end to all things. But when you stop and really think about it, you begin to see that death is not an end at all. Death is simply a transformation, a change in form. It is not a nothingness, but a passage into a different state, a shift in the flow of energy. Just as the wave rises and falls, just as the river flows and merges with the sea, so too does life move through cycles of birth and death, of creation and destruction. We are not born in any permanent sense, and we do not die in any permanent sense. We are part of the flow, part of the whole. And when we let go of the illusion of separateness, we see that death is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. For it is the very fabric of life itself. What's going on? But the truth is, the more we search for answers, the more we encounter paradoxes. We want to know the meaning of life, but life, in its essence, is beyond meaning. It is beyond definition, beyond categorization. When we try to pin it down with concepts, when we try to define it with words, it slips through our fingers. It escapes our grasp. It's a river that refuses to be captured, a dance that can't be contained within the lines of a page. And yet, in its very elusiveness, there is beauty. In its mystery, there is wonder. Because the moment we think we understand it all, the moment we think we have it figured out, life shows us that it is far more complex, far more vast than we could ever imagine. In fact, perhaps it's this very mystery, this very unknowability that makes life so extraordinary. The fact that it is impossible to truly understand it is what gives it its richness. Life is not a puzzle to be solved, it is an experience to be lived. We are not here to figure it out, we are here to be in it. And by being in it, we become part of it. The more we accept the mystery, the more we let go of our need to control, to define, the more fully we can participate in the dance. There's a certain freedom in not knowing, in not having all the answers. There's a kind of liberation that comes from surrendering to the flow, from allowing life to unfold as it will, without trying to impose our will upon it. When we stop to think about it, we see that life isn't just about what we do, or what we accomplish, or what we own. It's not about our jobs, our relationships, or our possessions. These things are important, of course, but they are not the essence of life. The essence of life is the experience itself, the moment-to-moment unfolding, the dance of existence. Life is not a destination, it's a journey. But not a journey in the way we think of journeys, because we tend to think of journeys as linear, as progressions toward a goal. Life is a journey in the sense that it is a continuous movement, a constant becoming. It's not about reaching some point, some final destination. It's about being fully immersed in the process, the unfolding of the present moment. The goal is not to arrive, but to participate. And yet we live in a culture that is obsessed with arriving, obsessed with goals and achievements. We are taught from a young age that life is something we need to do something we need to do something with. We are told that success is measured by what we achieve, by what we accumulate, by how much we progress along the path of life. But this view of life is a distortion, a misunderstanding of what life truly is. Life is not something that happens to us. Life is what we are. We are not separate from the process. We are the process itself. When we learn to see life not as a series of steps towards some distant goal, but as the unfolding of the present moment, we begin to experience life in its fullness. It's fascinating, isn't it? We live our lives thinking that we are distinct from the world around us, that we are separate from the forces of nature, from the rhythm of the universe. But the more you look at it, the more you realize that this sense of separateness is an illusion. You are not separate from the world. You are the world. The air you breathe, the food you eat, the earth you walk on, the sky above you, these are not separate from you. They are you. When you sit down to eat a meal, you are not just eating food. You are consuming the entire history of the earth, the plants and animals that came together to form that meal, the sun, the rain, the soil. All of these elements are part of you, are part of the same continuous process. When you breathe, you are breathing in the same air that has been circulating through the planet for millennia. You are part of a vast, interconnected web of life. And this web does not stop with you. You are part of it. You are a movement. A moment in an endless flow of energy, of life, of creation. This is the weirdness of existence. We think of ourselves as individuals, as separate beings, but we are not individuals at all. We are expressions of the whole, each of us a unique manifestation of the same process. You are not you in isolation. You are you in relationship to everything else. And in that relationship, you are constantly changing, constantly evolving. There is no fixed you, no permanent self. There is only the flow, only the ever-changing dance of life. You are not the same person you were yesterday. You will not be the same person tomorrow. And that's the beauty of it. The beauty of life lies in its fluidity, in its constant transformation. But our culture teaches us to resist this fluidity. It teaches us to try to hold on to things, to cling to our identities, to define ourselves by our roles and accomplishments. We are told that we need to be somebody, that we need to have a clear sense of who we are and what we stand for. But this insistence on identity, on permanence, is part of the illusion. It's a false notion that keeps us trapped in the idea of separateness. When we cling to the idea of self, we miss the deeper truth, which is that we are not separate. We are not individuals. We are the process of life itself, unfolding in real time, ever changing, ever moving, ever becoming. This brings us back to the mystery. The more we try to define ourselves, the more we try to nail down who we are and what we are supposed to be, the more we lose touch with the true nature of our existence. We become trapped in a mental image, a concept, and we forget that we are not concepts. We are life. We are not the thoughts in our heads, the labels we put on ourselves, the roles we play. We are the experience itself, the moment-to-moment unfolding of reality, the eternal flow of energy of life. We are the song of existence, sung by the universe through the mouth of this body, through this mind. And when we stop clinging to our ideas, when we stop trying to control, we open ourselves up to the full richness of life. And in that strange, mysterious, unpredictable flow, we find ourselves, not as individuals, but as part of the whole, as part of the dance. Not as separate entities, but as expressions of the same life force that animates the entire universe. We are not apart from life, we are life itself. And when we realize this, when we stop clinging to the illusion of separateness, we stop fighting the flow. We stop trying to control it, we stop resisting. And in that moment, we become one with the universe. We become the dance. We become the flow. We think we're in control, don't we? We act as though we are masters of our own fate, as if we stand apart from the currents of life, able to direct our own course. We build systems, we set goals, we make plans, believing that these things allow us to shape the world to our will. And in many ways, this is true, but only on the surface. If we look deeper, we see that this control is an illusion. We are not the captains of the ship of life, we are the ship, the current, the waves, the wind, all at once, caught up in the flow of existence. There is no outside force steering us, no self guiding our way through life. The very notion of control is itself a fragile construct, a mask we wear in an attempt to shield ourselves from the vast, unfathomable forces at play in the universe. This idea of control is rooted in the sense of separateness we carry with us. We believe that we are separate beings distinct from everything else, and this belief makes us think we can shape the world around us according to our desires. But when we look closer, we realize that this sense of separation is an illusion. The world is not outside of us, it is within us. We are not distinct from the forces of nature, we are part of them. We are part of them. We are not separate from the universe, we are the universe, experiencing itself. The idea that we are separate from life is a mental construct, a habit of thought, a conditioned way of looking at the world. The truth is that we are not separate at all. We are the entire process unfolding in real time. We are the dance, the song, the wind, the fire, the water, the earth, all moving together in a vast, interconnected whole. But this understanding doesn't come easily. We are so deeply conditioned to think in terms of separation, of individualism, that we struggle to see beyond this narrow framework. We're taught from an early age that we are separate from others, that we are separate from nature, that we are separate from the universe itself. We're taught that the world is made up of things individual, discrete objects that can be isolated, defined, and controlled. But the more we look at it, the more we see that this view is limited. The world is not made up of isolated objects. It is a web of interconnections, a network of relationships, a seamless flow of energy and matter. There is no thing that exists in isolation. There is only the process of becoming, the continuous unfolding of the universe, a dance that never stops, a flow that never ceases. And you, my friend, are part of that flow. You are not separate from it. You are it. This isn't to say that we should simply give up, that we should abandon all effort, that we should stop trying to shape our lives in meaningful ways. Effort, intention, and action are not the problem. The problem is the attachment to the idea of separateness, the attachment to the belief that we are isolated, independent entities. When we act from this place of separation, our actions are driven by fear, by the need to control, by the desire to secure our individual survival. But when we act from the understanding that we are part of the whole, when we act from the knowledge that we are the flow itself, our actions become a natural expression of the universe, rather than an attempt to impose our will upon it. We act not from a place of fear, but from a place of trust. We act not from the desire to control, but from the understanding that everything is interconnected, everything is part of the process, and everything unfolds exactly as it should. We may ask ourselves, if everything is part of the flow, if everything is interconnected, then what role do we play in this vast web of existence? What are we here for? What is our purpose? The answer to this question, however, is not as simple as it might seem. The very notion of purpose is part of the illusion. We want to believe that there is a specific, fixed reason for our existence, that there is some grand plan, some cosmic blueprint, some ultimate goal toward which we are all headed. But in truth, purpose is not something external. Something that we must find purpose is something we create through the act of living, through the act of participating in the flow. We are not here to fulfill a predetermined purpose. We are here to experience life in its fullest, to participate in the dance, to be part of the unfolding. Purpose is not something out there waiting for us to discover. It is something we embody in every moment, in every action, in every breath. This is the beauty of existence. It is not static, it is not fixed, it is not predetermined. Life is not about reaching a specific point, about achieving some goal, about fulfilling some destiny. Life is about the journey, the process, the becoming. Life is the unfolding, the continuous dance of creation and destruction, of birth and death, of movement and stillness. And you are part of that. Your life is not something that happens to you, it is something that you are. Your actions, your thoughts, your feelings, these are not separate from the world, they are part of it. They are the universe experiencing itself through you. And in that experience, in that participation, you find meaning, you find purpose, you find beauty. And this, my friend, is the paradox of existence. The more we try to control it, the more we try to figure it out, the more we try to make it work, the more we miss the point. The point is not to control life, it is to surrender to it. The point is not to figure it out, but to be in it, to experience it fully, to dance with it. Life is not a problem to be solved, it is an experience to be lived. And when we let go of the need to control it, when we stop trying to make it conform to our expectations, we find that life opens up in ways we could never have imagined.